The U.S. government is selling more weapons to Taiwan, while China and Taiwan fight a war over birds. And director Judd Apatow criticizes Hollywood's relationship with China. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. The U.S. is pushing an arms sales surge to Taiwan. Yes, the Trump administration is poised to make a $7 billion arms deal with Taiwan. These include as many as 7 major weapons systems, including mines, cruise missiles, and drones to Taiwan. Now, if the U.S. throws in some toys for President Tsai Ing-wen's cats, it'll be a done deal. Perfect. The U.S. has made weapon sales to Taiwan before. But 7 major weapon systems all at once, that would be unprecedented. You know, a lot about the Trump administration has been unprecedented. Of course, this is not a done deal yet, or even an officially announced deal. Both Reuters and the Wall Street Journal based their reports on unnamed sources, and any arms deals will have to be approved by Congress. But under Trump, the U.S. has shown more support for Taiwan than any administration in decades. Apparently, it's part of what the Pentagon is calling Fortress Taiwan, a campaign to form a military counterbalance to China. I hear Japan is involved too. That one's called Super Dimension Fortress Japan. And I've got one question for China's People's Liberation Army. Do you remember love? No? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? But the U.S. isn't just supporting Taiwan with weapons sales. The Trump administration sent Keith Krach, a State Department official, to Taiwan this week to attend a memorial service for former President Lee Teng-hui, who helped lead Taiwan to democracy. According to Taiwan's foreign ministry, Krach is the highest-level State Department official to visit Taiwan in decades. Last month, U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar became the first cabinet official to visit Taiwan in decades as well. And like with Azar, the Chinese Communist Party isn't taking Krach's visit well. According to my favorite state-run media, the Global Times, the further the U.S. and Taiwan Island go in this direction, the more likely the situation in the Taiwan Straits will spiral out of control. Taiwan will suffer the most. Promoting relations with the U.S. is nothing but a way to quench its thirst by drinking poison. Quench its thirst by drinking poison? I hope that's just a colorful metaphor and not a sign that Xi Jinping is getting geopolitical advice from his best buddy, Putin. Cheers! U.S. support for Taiwan comes as China becomes increasingly aggressive. For example, and let me just make it clear that this is a real story, I'm not making this up. China is attacking Taiwan in the world of birding. You know, bird watching. Taiwan's largest birding group is called the Chinese Wild Bird Federation. It also advocates for bird habitat conservation. Apparently, watching birds and conserving their habitats is extremely political, because in a recent statement, Taiwan's Chinese Wild Bird Federation announced it no longer has ties to BirdLife International, a UK-based non-governmental organization. Why? Because BirdLife International said the Taiwan Birding Organization would need to sign a document formally acknowledging that Taiwan is a part of China, which they weren't willing to do. So BirdLife kicked them out. It's another example of the Chinese Communist Party pressuring international organizations to exclude Taiwan. Yes, first the WHO, and now bird conservation groups. What's next? Will Taiwan get kicked out of an international knitting club? Even before this latest issue, the Taiwanese Birding Organization has had trouble with BirdLife International. The CWBF has, in fact, undergone 3 name changes in English in order to comply with pressure from BirdLife since becoming a partner of BirdLife in 1996. Now, BirdLife never specifically said they were told to do all this by China, but it was because of China. You know, I've got a bird for Chinese leader Xi Jinping right here. That is a rare and unpleasant species. And I'll be back with more crazy China news headlines after the break. Welcome back. Chinese hacking of U.S. companies costs America big. Some have estimated the total price tag at $5 trillion a year. Well, the U.S. has just charged 5 Chinese nationals for cyber attacks on more than 100 U.S. companies. Some of the well-known victims include Microsoft, Facebook, and Google's parent company, Alphabet. Now, practically speaking, the charges against the Chinese nationals don't accomplish a whole lot. But it will make the Chinese Communist Party's attempts to portray itself as a responsible global actor seem a little less believable. Though really, building concentration camps in Xinjiang should have already made that clear. The Chinese Communist Party is trying to work out a trade deal with the EU. For some reason, it's having trade issues. In a recent summit, 3 EU leaders drew Xi Jinping's attention to China's human rights issues one by one, from Hong Kong, Xinjiang, Tibet, bookseller Gui Minhai, and Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, who have been detained in China. Don't they know that calling out your human rights abuses to your face isn't polite? I'm sorry, Xi, Westerners can be so uncivilized. So how did Xi Jinping respond? He began pointing out human rights abuses in Europe, like anti-Semitism. He said, every country should first and foremost care about their own business. We believe the EU can properly resolve its own human rights problems. China does not accept lectures on human rights and is opposed to double standards. I think the trade negotiations are going really well. But China could be in for a little bit of trade relief. The World Trade Organization says American tariffs on China broke global trade rules. That's because the U.S. singled out China for tariffs back in 2018, and the U.S. did it without the WTO's permission. Of course, since China has broken just about every WTO rule in the book, and the WTO has done nothing about it, I have a feeling Trump will still be able to sleep at night despite the ruling. The New York Times criticized the Trump administration for effectively crippling the WTO panel responsible for handling appeals of trade disputes by refusing to appoint new members to it. See, if the panel had enough members to function and its members upheld the ruling, the World Trade Organization could authorize China to retaliate if the United States did not change its policies or if the United States and China could not agree to some other form of compensation. Yes, if only China could retaliate for all the U.S.'s unfair trade practices. Actually, China has already retaliated by imposing their own tariffs on the U.S. And since those tariffs were also imposed without the WTO's permission, China is also breaking the WTO rule. Doesn't anybody listen to the WTO anymore? Judd Apatow, famed Hollywood writer, director, and producer of thought-provoking classics such as Talladega Nights and Pee-wee's Big Holiday, has called out Hollywood for censoring on behalf of China. Here he is on MSNBC's Mavericks with Ari Melber.
For me, I think what I perceive as more chilling is a corporate type of censorship that people don't really notice, which is a lot of these giant corporate entities have business with, countries around the world, Saudi Arabia or China, and they're just not going to criticize them, and they're not going to let their shows criticize them, or they're not going to air documentaries that go deep into truthful areas because they just make so much money. They have just completely shut down critical content about human rights abuses in China. Hey, I want to write a movie about the concentration camps in China and Muslims in concentration camps. I want to write a movie about someone who escapes. No one would buy the pitch. Instead of us doing business with China and that leading to China becoming more free, what has happened is a place like China has bought our silence with their money.
This is terrible news. This means no one will buy my big Hollywood movie idea. Dalai Lama, Secret Ninja. In the film, the Dalai Lama is an immortal warrior who builds a team of elite Uyghur freedom fighters, and they rescue Falun Gong practitioners from the Chinese military's secret organ harvesting program. Then in the sequel, they lead a ninja revolution in Hong Kong. And in the threequel, they travel back in time to stop the Tiananmen Square massacre. There is huge franchise potential here, Hollywood. Have your people call my people. And after the short break, the US government is telling travelers they should reconsider going to Hong Kong, at least until the Secret Ninja Revolution. Welcome back. The US State Department has issued a new travel alert for Hong Kong. Level 3, reconsider. Why reconsider? Well, partly the coronavirus, but also because the PRC government arbitrarily enforces local laws, including by carrying out arbitrary and wrongful detentions and through the use of exit bans on US citizens and citizens of other countries without due process of law. And this is a huge blow to the reputation of Hong Kong as an international financial center. You can't be an international financial center if you're controlled by an authoritarian regime that makes it too dangerous to even travel to the city. This comes as 24 Hong Kong activists appeared in court for commemorating the Tiananmen Square massacre back in June. Great Britain is now also warning citizens of the risk of arbitrary detention in China. I wonder which is worse, Chinese prison food or normal British food? But I wouldn't want to give you the impression the Chinese Communist Party is somehow bad. How bad can it be when it gets the Vatican's seal of approval? The Vatican is set to extend a church leadership agreement that gives the officially atheist Chinese Communist Party a say in appointing Catholic bishops in China. Did anybody tell the Vatican about this? Somehow I don't think the Vatican's deal is going to end well. The U.S. ambassador to China is stepping down. I can't imagine why he'd want to leave. Perhaps he felt unwelcomed after state-run People's Daily refused to run an editorial he wrote. That's so weird, because the New York Times published an editorial from the Chinese ambassador. It was about how the U.S. shouldn't point fingers at wherever the coronavirus came from, because we all need to work together. Ironically, Branstad's editorial was called Resetting the Relationship Based on Reciprocity. I kind of think China doesn't want to be treated the same way China treats the U.S. for some reason. A Chinese computer science professor has gone viral on the Chinese internet after he suggested 3 ways China could nuke the world. 1. A Chinese nuclear submarine could detonate in the Pacific Ocean, sending out 2,000-meter shock waves. 2. Detonating thousands of nuclear bombs in the Himalayas at the same time could change the orbit of the Earth. Or, my personal favorite, number 3. Detonating thousands of nuclear bombs 10,000 meters below the surface could cause the Earth's core to collapse, killing everything. Obviously, this professor doesn't know what he's talking about. Everyone knows you use nuclear bombs to restart the Earth's core, not destroy it. Physics, people. Physics. And with that hard-hitting reporting done, it's now time for me to answer a question from a member of the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army, fans who support the show on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Weish asks, Chris, it seems like the one redeeming quality of a dictatorship should be that a government can quickly and unilaterally respond to a crisis, since it's not necessary to build consensus. Why doesn't this work in practice, especially as it relates to non-political things like natural disasters? That is a fantastic question. Yeah, you hear all the time, democracies are too slow to get things done. Dictatorships can act fast to get things done. And that may be true, but which system do you want actually choosing what gets done? One that's accountable to the people, or one that's dedicated to maintaining power? The coronavirus is a great example. You had prominent Western media saying China's authoritarian response was the answer. It made China's system look better and better, according to Bloomberg. In fact, maybe it's a model for the world. I know I can't wait for American authorities to round people up and shove them in boxes. Of course, the reality is, the whole reason the coronavirus got to be as big of a problem as it did was because the Communist Party was more concerned about covering it up than stopping its spread. So yeah, it acted fast in covering it up. That was especially a problem because lower-level party officials are afraid of getting punished by higher-level officials. What about all the natural disasters hitting China over the summer? Well, the response from the CCP was to detain and beat petitioners and drown out poor rural areas to save the cities. They certainly got things done, but are they the right things? So the next time someone tells you dictatorships really know how to get things done, tell them to move to China, rural China. Thanks for your question, Weish. And if you want me to answer your question on the show, join the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/China Uncensored to learn more. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.